What is a near-death experience, and why do they come with ecstatic and mystical phenomena, whether it's a transcendent or a terrifying experience? And what is the dark moving tunnel with light at the end of it that so many people report seeing? To understand all these questions, we need to know what vision is firstly. So, photons enter the eye and are converted into electrical signals. These electrical signals make their way to the visual cortex, where they are interpreted as images. Vision and imagery is more than just translating those electrical signals. There's actually chemical and neurological reactions that occur that produce biophotons, and then these biophotons are recreating that image. So basically, your brain is creating a biophysical picture of what you're looking at. They serve as sort of visual pixels, right? They're little flashes of light that fire in synchronous activity to recreate an image. The images and perceptions that you receive are not stored as images, but they are stored as epigenetically encoded information. The biophotons that create images are generated by visual neurons. Because of that, images we see are not rigid objects, but they can be changed and influenced by a variety of factors. It means that the visual system can create irrational or objects that aren't actually there, such as through visual hallucinations and dreams. So that's how vision works when it comes from the outside. But what happens when that vision comes from the inside, from a phosphene? Light or photons, they don't have to enter the eye to be perceived by our consciousness. Images can be reproduced within the brain simply by thinking about them. But what happens in extreme situations such as a near-death experience? This is where the LGN comes into. It's a big component of visual processing. This structure is part of the thalamus. If you notice, the LGN is a series of sort of half circles, and because you have two of them, they each recreate half of an image. The thalamus fires this synchronous activity called spindle bursts. It does this when you're preparing for sleep, which occurs in the second stage of NREM. This is what begins the paralysis of the body and prepares it for sleep. However, in certain states, whether it's meditation or injury or psychedelics, whatever it may be, you could actually be conscious of the spindle bursts that will fire. The sleep spindles will fire every few seconds, and when the visual system is still activated, it's going to appear as a green phosphine ring that seems to be moving out of the vision, and there's usually a few of those, as sleep spindles will occur periodically 5 or 6 times every few seconds. They may also appear as a green ring with a blue eye in the center. So to reiterate real quick, the thalamus is connected to the LGN, so those sleep spindles are having rebound spikes that are going through the LGN, and that's why it appears as a ring moving away from your vision, because this is where your imaging processing is happening. And the ring is due to the shape of the LGN itself. So this is the green phosphine rings. Those LGN cells are firing rebound spikes after those spindle bursts. These generate the green phosphine rings. The dark tunnel comes from hypersynchronous spindle bursts, and that prevents the rebound spikes. Under this circumstance, there's not enough time for the visual processing to encode the information of the light and the luminance that you get from the green rings. The origin of the dark rings. If the RTN fires spindle waves at a rate 2 or more per second, this is much faster than in normal sleep spindles, which only fires 1 burst every 3 to 10 seconds. The fast-moving spindle waves block the thalamic relay of visual signals caused by the random metabolic discharges taking place in the retina. The signals that generate the charcoal gray color of the visual field, and this subtraction of all vision-related signals produces the dark waves. As the stream of black waves pour into the visual field and shrink in diameter, seeming to recede toward a distant point in 3-dimensional space, this evokes a sensation of optic flow, which creates the illusion of moving through a dark tunnel, which is itself in motion. Basically, what's happening is these biophotons produced by the thalamus are entering your visual processing in such a way that it appears like a series of rings moving either further or into your visual field, giving that characteristic fast-moving tunnel effect. This effect can happen during different sorts of meditation and different phenomena associated with psychedelics, injury, disease, and of course near-death experiences. because it's hypersynchronous activity from the thalamus shooting out these sleep spindles and them entering into the visual processing. This hypersynchronous activity is a type of seizure. One might suspect that here too the transition in and out of hypersynchronous seizures may occur spontaneously with a much higher frequency than anyone has hitherto supposed and may not be recognized as seizures. And for this part, they're talking about the dark moving tunnels that can be experienced through meditation. And here they're talking about that influx of dark moving fast rings that create an illusion of moving forward or falling backward through a dark tunnel, which is superseded by a gradual brightening and bluing of the entire visual field, which gives the viewer a sense of being immersed. These striking parallels in visual imagery suggest the hypothesis that, as a result of traumatic injuries, these victims experience a sudden onset of hypersynchronous spike wave complexes. And then they speculate that during the NDE, there's probably enough intensity of the spike wave complexes may be sufficient to drive the rapid emergence of a hippocampal seizure that generates the bright light. They're specifically speaking of a series of meditative phosphenes that can be generated from the green phosphine rings to the swirls and eye-like images to the dark tunnel radiating spray into a blue sky with a white moon that appears, and then finally a trident of like rays blossoming out and ecstatic lightning flashes. The reason why I'm bringing up the meditative phosphenes is because they are taking advantage of the same parts of the brain that are experienced during NDEs for meditation, for shamanic trances, for psychedelics, for all kinds of things, right? The point that's kind of gotten away from, especially like New Age spirituality and stuff like that, and psychedelics and people into mystical experiences and stuff, is they attribute significance to each of the methods of obtaining those ecstatic visions, when in fact it's something inherent of the brain. It's an intrinsic quality of hypersynchronous activity. They're seizures. So now we get to the question of why does this induce such transcendent experiences? Or in some cases, terrifying experiences, right? Usually they'll say visions of heaven or visions of hell or something like that. The reason being is because it has to do with dreams and the unconscious. Because as we just discussed, these events are what occurs during sleep activation. Only they're being interrupted by visual signals, which causes the experience of seeing these seizure events in the brain. All of that hypersynchronous activity in the brain generating these free radicals and these biophotons and the phosphenes, they are encoded with information, and that information is usually left in the unconscious. Remember, at the beginning, that information is epigenetically encoded in the brain. There's billions of non-conscious processes that go on and are recorded in the brain, from microbial interaction to gut-brain communication to environmental information to sensory information that is just put in the brain non-consciously. That may come out during dreams, during hallucinations, during meditation, and other states where the hypersynchronous activity can be represented or can be drawn out in the form of conscious vision, which is biophotons, which is the phosphenes. Hopefully that didn't get too confusing. Let me try to break it down even easier. Your body takes in all kinds of information, from light particles to sound waves to smell particles, taste, touch. All the information that gets put into your body is translated into electrical signals in the brain. Those electrical signals can be moved to conscious attention in the form of biophotons, which releases free radicals, but it also presents that information to the consciousness. You can pause to read this if you want. It's just more about the epigenetic modifications of neurons. But this video was necessary because we're going to go from here back into shamanism, kingship, prophets, and different ceremonies and practices that take advantage of that information that you could pull out from your brain through hypersynchronous seizures, such as things like baptism. The other topic has to do with taking after images, right? Like when you stain your retina with light and converting that into information, like consciously encoding that yourself. There's a lot to talk about. This was way longer than I meant to be, but thanks for watching.